All right, good morning, everyone, and welcome. My name is John Donadio. I'm with the New Jersey Association of Counties, and we again want to welcome you to our third in a series of non-COVID related workshops. These are free video conferences for public officials. We have two more set for later on in the year. We'll send you details as they become available. This one is entitled Revitalizing New Jersey's Infrastructure Through the I-Bank, where our panelists will provide an overview of the water and infrastructure financing programs available through the I-Bank. This will include a discussion on eligible projects and borrowers, at the application process, and much more. And before I talk about some housekeeping and introduce our speakers, I want to turn it over to NJAC's President and Monmouth County Administrator, Terry O'Connor, who would like to also welcome you here this morning.
Thanks, John. Good morning, everyone. I want to welcome everybody and thank you for making time on a Wednesday morning when it's like 90 degrees and 100% humidity, and it's right after 4th of July. So thank you so much for making time. I think you'll find this topic very interesting. It was one of the topics that we really wanted to have a workshop at our conference, but we were unable to. So the I-Bank is a very unique concept, and it's really very helpful. So I'm thankful that everybody's on, and I think you will find this a very worthwhile use of your time this morning. So thanks, John. Let's get to business.
Great. Thank you, Terry, and good to see you, and Mr. Marshall as well. So a couple of housekeeping things. This course has been approved for continuing education credits for CMFO, CCFO, and RMC. So please see Lauren in our office for details and to make sure that you get your credits for 1 hour. And we're going to save our questions until after the presentation. If you have any questions, please put them in the chat box. And again, we will get them to you at the end of the presentation. I want to thank, of course, Angela Wolf for handling all of the IT and the video feed. She does a fantastic job, and I appreciate her help as always. So with that, I'm pleased to introduce, we're going to have two speakers today. Our first speaker is Robert Fernandez. He is the COO for transportation with the New Jersey I-Bank. He's going to kick it off on discuss some transportation issues. And then we have George Rolon, who is the project manager, who will discuss water, also with the NJIB. So Mr. Fernandez, the floor is yours.
Thank you, John. And on behalf of David Zimmer and the entire I-Bank staff, thank you so much for giving us this opportunity to be a part of this presentation. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for being here. My name, as John had mentioned, is Rob Fernandez. I oversee the transportation financing program over at the New Jersey Infrastructure Bank. With that said, let me share the screen over so everyone can see. Let's see. And as soon as it pops up, just please let me know you can see it. You got it. Oh. Okay, there we go. All right, so you should be seeing right now, New Jersey Transportation Bank, Better Roads, Lower Budgets, our title page. That being said, if everyone's familiar with the New Jersey Environmental Infrastructure Trust, then that's who we are. Some years back, it was changed over to the New Jersey Infrastructure Bank, or better known as the I-Bank. That being said, a few years ago, the New Jersey legislature amended the Enabling Act, allowing the I-Bank to now also finance transportation projects. And the program under transportation was built pretty much to replicate the water program in pretty much majority of all its facets. The Transportation Bank is jointly managed and administered by two entities, which is New Jersey Department of Transportation and the I-Bank itself. So in this partnership, DOT provides appropriations of $22.6 million. That comes from the New Jersey legislature and through the Transportation Trust Fund. What we do with that funding at the I-Bank, we go ahead and offer and distribute loans to municipalities and counties or local government units for transportation infrastructure projects. And that being said, we in turn also manage the loan repayment process as well. So looking into this partnership a little bit, getting a better understanding of it, our role, our responsibilities, we oversee the application system, which is better known as NJ-moves.com. We also determine borrower eligibility, which comes down to local government units, which we'll get into a little bit of detail. We manage the entire loan process itself from the beginning when you first apply all the way through long-term closing. And we also manage disbursements as well. DOT's role in all this is they own the project priority system. They also determine if projects are eligible as they come in through the application system. They also in turn rate and rank the projects, which by the way, if you want to find out a detailed description and point allocation system of how that's all done, our 2023 January report is on our website, and that provides a breakdown of how projects are rated. And finally, DOT also conducts a technical review of the application of the project itself in the process. So a little bit of background on eligibility. Project eligibility, it must be a transportation project and it must be on the project priority list. So once you receive a rating from DOT, they then rank you on the project priority list. Now, in terms of determining borrower eligibility, must be a local government unit authorized to construct, operate, and maintain public highways. Okay, so now looking at the application process, applications are done on a yearly basis. You can go into the system anytime during the year, go ahead and submit your project, and we'll review it with you. So it's rolling application submissions anytime throughout the year, and it's done through our website, our application portal, which is nj-moves.com. Once you submit your application, what will happen is we'll get notified and we'll go ahead and schedule an application meeting with you. And during this application meeting, we go through a lot of details, a lot of expectation management, time periods, things of that nature. And then finally, from that application period, you'll have a better understanding of when you would like to receive your allocation of funds. Now, allocation is done on a quarterly basis. Although you can come in anytime during the year, submit your application, we only allocate 4 times a year. So this is a bit of a view, probably more of a 30,000-foot view of the application process itself. Once you notify us and let us know that you want to be allocated, we'll go ahead and allocate and set those funds aside for you at the next given quarter. At that point, you'll start working towards certifying your contract. Now our program works for 3 contracts. You have your engineering and design contract, construction management contract, and your construction contract. At a minimum, to come through our program, you have to have a construction contract certified and closed with us. So you'll go through your contract certification. Whichever contract you certify first, we will go ahead and do a short-term loan closing. And what that does is basically it takes the full amount of the project and locks it in, sets it aside. The contract that you certify, those funds now become available to you for disbursement. So as you submit requisitions to us from your contractors, your vendors, whoever may be the contracted folks that take care of the project for you, we will then wire those funds to you. And I'll get into a little detail on that later. From short-term closing, now you're working towards your construction certification. You also continue doing your requisition submission to us, and we'll go ahead and continue doing disbursements. From there, you'll get into your concurrence of award with DOT and then ultimately begin construction on your project. The project goes through its construction period. Once the project's completed with construction or 3 full fiscal years have elapsed, whichever occurs first, the project is now, the short-term loan is now converted into a long-term loan, and then your loan repayments will start commencing. So just to hit up a little bit on the allocation process, basically allocation is the process of committing the program funds for the full amount of the project. So if you tell us, I'm ready to commence construction or receive concurrence of award from DOT within 12 months for all surface transportation projects and 24 months for bridge projects, then what we do is we'll set aside those funds in the next allocation period or the next quarter. Our quarters run July, October, January, and April, which is the state fiscal year quarters. Just keep in mind, once you have been allocated, you are not committed to the program still. But to be allocated, you must submit a project application through NJ Moves first. And then after that's done, the project must be rated and ranked on the project priority list. Okay, and as mentioned, once you're allocated, your project has 12 months to receive concurrence from award from DOT. If it's a bridge, there is a bit of an exception there. There's another 12 months, giving it a total of 24 because of the complexity with bridge projects. If a project, here's the worst case scenario. If a project does not meet that timeline for the concurrence of award, the project is deallocated, which means that we'll pull back those funds and your rating will lose 5 points. However, you still remain on the project priority list and you could come back into the program at any time. I can tell you right now, we do have funds available. So if that was happening right now at this point in time, it wouldn't be an issue. As demand begins to increase, then it can become an issue, because if you're losing 5 points and there's limited funds, it may make things a little more challenging to come back into the program on a given quarter. So that's basically what would happen. Other than that, you're still not committed to the program. You're not obligated to go through the program if you don't meet the allocation, if you determine that you want to be allocated or you don't meet that window. So as you submit your application, you're looking at your project possibly going into one of these 5 categories, which is bridge assets, multimodal, road assets, congestion relief, and freight assets. And there's, in our application system, there's a description explaining what each of these categories entail. That way, as you go through the application, you'll get to see that, and you can go ahead and select it, the appropriate category for your project. Once a project is submitted, the responsibilities with DOT are technical and environmental reviews. So DOT will look at the technical requirements of the project, what must be met, what has to be changed, anything of that nature. There is an environmental piece where DOT environmental reviews this for an executive order 215, so that it actually grants a waiver if it applies. And the final piece is small business enterprise requirements for civil rights. That also has a role, percentages determined, and that gets you'll be notified of what that percentage of requirement is for small business enterprise. On the NJIB side, the iBank side, we have a financial responsibility in this. So as your project is rated and ranked, and we have our application meeting, we'll, in our discussion with you, we can see if you're within that 12 or 24 month window, depending on your project. And we can actually, if you are, we can actually allot you bonus points to help bump you up on that list and have a higher ranking, which also increases your opportunity for allocation. We also perform the credit review on your project. Our accounting and finance team reviews that. And we act as your agent with the local finance board for reviews. So we'll work with local finance board on your behalf. Our bond counsel, in conjunction with your bond counsel, will work together on all legal requirements and compliance reviews. So that's pretty much what's going on behind the scenes during the project review process, which is throughout the application. So a lot of folks want to know what makes our program good. Why is it worthwhile? So here's an example of a $5 million project with a 20-year maturity for a AA3 borrower. All right, now these numbers are based on April. So actually the numbers now are probably a lot better than what you're seeing on the screen. But if you work from the top down on all 4 rows, we'll start from the very top. If the borrower would have sought self-financing at 100%, they've ultimately would have paid $6.878 million, which is almost $2 million after the 20 years in total payments. Now, if you go to the second row from the top, if they would have gone with us for 100% financing, our program offers 50% no interest and the other 50% at our AAA rating. So under this particular scenario, they would have had a savings of almost 8%. When you go to the third row, there's a program with NJDOT called Local Aid, and we work very closely with the folks at Local Aid. Local Aid allots funding for grant programs every year on a yearly basis. And I can't speak for them, but I believe right now they're in a window where applications are being submitted. So with that being said, since we work jointly with local aid, we highly encourage our potential borrowers, our municipalities, our counties, to definitely seek local aid grants, municipal aid grants, county grants. In this particular scenario, looking at the third row from the top, the local aid grant covers 20% of the total funds of the project or cost of the project. So now the borrower would simply just be responsible for the 80% of financing. At the end of the 20 years, they're looking almost at 28% in total savings on interest. Now, the ideal scenario is the bottom one, and this is the one we always encourage borrowers to do. Again, go with your local aid grant, submit the application, see what DOT local aid offers in terms of a grant approval. However, the 80% that's left over comes through us. Because of that 80%, half of it is interest-free. The other half is at our AAA rating. So this is where borrowers will get the biggest bang for their buck. It's almost a 34% savings. So we're not a grant program, but it's structured much like a grant-like program in terms of the savings that you receive on interest. So looking at our financing programs, we have 3 types of financing programs, of which 2 are currently right now in effect. So short-term loans, where we cover your engineering and design costs, we cover your construction management and your construction costs. Then you have your long-term loans. So the iBank for the first time has gone on the transportation side into long-term funding. We just did that last month for 6 projects by 5 borrowers. They actually closed and they're starting their long-term payments in October. So there was a lot of flexibility that we had worked with them. Some of them chose to pay their interest off the bat immediately before going long-term. Some of them wanted to pay some principal. We are very flexible. If your program happens to come through if your project happens to come through our program and you're seeking to possibly do that, we can possibly work with you on those terms and help out alleviate your debt service payments. Now, there is alternative program loans. They're still in development. So last year, the FHWA had approved our application to be designated as a state infrastructure bank. What that does, that allows the iBank to now leverage federal funding programs for transportation for our borrowers. One such program that is right now being stood up and we're working to get it approved and finalized is the TIFIA RPI. This is our federal rural program initiative. And basically what it is there's certain areas of the state of New Jersey that are outside, that are designated as rural by FHWA. We have maps on our website to help identify which areas these are. If you live in one of these areas, the benefits of borrowing through us become even greater. We're looking at 80% of the total project cost being funded at half the US Treasury rate, with the remaining 20% being at the iBank's base rate, which is that 50% interest-free, 50% at our AAA rating. Further, maturities are now going from 31 to 35 years. So this program is still being stood up. As you can imagine, New Jersey is heavily congested. So there's very few areas that may be eligible, but they're there. They are out there. We also have the SAIL Disaster Relief Program that's still in its infancy. And basically what that does is that allows us to be your conduit loan provider, where we will go ahead in lieu of you waiting for your federal grants for a disaster, we will be able to go ahead and provide you the loan with the grant being your payback when it gets approved and finalized and sent back to you. So these are a snapshot of some of our programs for financing. So a little more in detail regarding the short-term loan program. So as mentioned earlier, your short-term loan contract is closed once you certify your first contract, whether it's engineering design, construction management. But once you certify your first contract, we will go ahead and do a short-term loan closing with you for the entire amount of your project, okay? And we cover a lot of costs. Your bond fees, we cover that. Planning and design, permitting, a lot of those things get covered into our program. Requisitions. So as you submit your requisitions, we will wire those payments to you. Once your contract is certified, whatever costs you incur under that contract, those receipts, once you submit those receipts, those requisitions to us, we will wire the funds to you, and you in turn can pay your contractors back. That disbursement usually takes anywhere between 2 to 14 days, but on average, under a week is when we usually hit that mark. And here's a key thing about our short term. So now you know that on the long-term side, it's 50-50, right? If you look at the short term, here's the other benefit of our program. Interest is only charged on funds that are drawn. So as opposed with a traditional ban, when you issue a ban, you're responsible for the full interest on the full amount. With our program, as you come in and you have your contract certified, we're not charging you interest on the full amount of the project. We begin to charge you interest as you submit those requisitions to us, and we disperse the funds to you. So whatever that cost entailed, that's what you're getting charged interest on. All right. And keep in mind, as you're in the short-term loan period, which is your application process period and your construction period, meaning anything before long-term, it's based on cost incurred, and you're generally not paying any principal or interest payments during that period. So you'll see there's a green box on the screen. So from the month of July, we just set our new interest rate for short-term loans on the transportation side. It's 1.4. I believe yesterday I closed the business. The 1 year was at 2.77 on the US Treasury. So that means that basically in our program, as if your project is in our program right now, that is the interest that you're being charged for the costs that are incurred, what you submitted requisitions on. So it's beneficial. You save in terms of interest, and you're still holding on to your capital for a little bit longer for anything else that may pop up. Now, these interest costs, by the way, they're rolled into your long-term loan. So that's why you're generally not making any payments of interest or principal in the short term. So now going into long-term, all those interest charges and the principal amount of the project are now rolled over into your long-term loan. So keep in mind, your engineer's useful life certification is what determines the maturity of that long-term loan. However, it cannot exceed 31 years. So we can go up to 31 years. In terms of the rate, you know about the 50% interest free, 50% our AAA rating, but just this year, starting July 1st, and in accordance with our May report, we have a new option available. There are borrowers out there that we have come in contact with that don't want to go long-term for up to 31 years, 25 years, 20 years. Some of them want to go short. And one of our 5 borrowers that just went long-term actually went 5 years. So that being said, we let our borrowers know, look, the biggest bang for your buck is if your project is 500,000 or more. If you're under that threshold, it really doesn't give you much of a savings. However, there are borrowers that don't want to go that long. So what we have now implemented is a 75% interest-free portion of your project, and a 25% interest at our AAA rating if your project's maturity is 10 years or less. So if the borrower's looking to go 10 years or less in the long term, that's the standards that you're looking at in terms of interest. So 75% of your project is going to be interest-free. The other 25% is out of AAA rating. And ideally, we've come up with that simply because the longer you're drawn out in a maturity, you'll see greater savings. But if you're in a short-term period of maturity for the long term, then you're not really going to see a lot. So we tried to make this more attractive and beneficial to borrowers that are looking to go for a shorter amount of time on their long term. There used to be a local finance board requirement for 5% down payment. That was actually waived last year when the New Jersey legislature did vote that into law. As mentioned earlier, we do handle, we are basically your agent. We deal with the local finance board approval for you on your behalf. And lastly, the credit worthiness requirements. So coming through our program, it has to be an investment grade rating. I believe that's BBB minus with S&P and Moody's. But yes, it does have to be an minimum investment grade rating to come into our program. So just touching up a little bit on bans, our financing program versus bans. So we were going through a period of a little bit of a challenge last year. trying to get projects into our program simply because interest rates were incredibly low, particularly the 1 year. And I believe at the start of this year, the 1 year on January 3rd was at 40 basis points. We're looking at 277 basis points as of close of business yesterday. So coming through our program, we make it a point to stay substantially lower than the 1 year US Treasury when you're in the short term. So that right there is giving you a substantial amount of savings in terms of interest, and you're still holding on to your funds. Again, as mentioned earlier, interest is charged on costs incurred, not the full amount of the loan. All right, so once you do a short-term closing and you submit requisitions, we're only charging you interest on what you submitted, not the full amount of your project. Okay, also, no principal and interest payments during the short-term loan. And at a minimum, if you choose to come through our program, go through your short-term period, construction's complete, we now approach long-term financing period or long-term closing period. Keep in mind, if you want to pay back the full amount of the loan, that option is available. And we can, in essence, be your working line of capital in the short term as you look to get the project funded and completing. You have capital on hand and you want to pay it down, you can do that. We are flexible enough to be able to provide that option. So some common misconceptions that we have received in previous months and years. We've heard interest rates from other lenders and programs are better. There was a point where that was could be argued. Our interest rates were generally low last year leading up to this year. So just keep in mind, 50% of the loan is obtained through the iBank is interest-free. Treasury rates are more competitive in comparison to 1 year US Treasury. I'm sorry, short-term interest rates are more competitive. As you saw, we are 1.4 for the month of July. And every month that changes based on the market, how the market performs. So in August, there may be the same interest rate or there may be a new one. Whether it might be higher or lower depends on how the market performs. Principal and interest payments, you hold on to that longer. And keep in mind, coming through our program, so you can come into our program, submit an application, and decide that you want to be allocated, and we'll go ahead and allocate you. An important thing to note here, if you have incurred any engineering design costs in the previous 12 months, we can cover that as well. You could roll those costs into your engineering design contract and have that covered. And as the next 12 months that you go through the application process and certifying your contracts and getting the short-term loan closed, and then in essence going through construction for 3 full fiscal years, there's a possibility that you can see not paying any principal or interest payments between 3 to 5 years from the quarter that you're allocated. So that's a good thing simply because you're holding on to your capital and it gives you more options and flexibility. The key thing about construction that's also important to note, 3 full fiscal years, and I keep saying full fiscal years, that's important, simply because a fiscal year commences in July. Let's say you kick off construction July 20th. Well, from July 20th of this year to June 30th of next year is not a full fiscal year. So in essence, your full fiscal year really commences next July. So you're looking at an additional almost 11 months, almost 12 months of time that's not counting towards the 3 full fiscal year time period. And that's big. That gives you a lot of flexibility. So just keep that in mind. That's a key note to take. Another comment that we do get feedback a lot of is community has enough capital on hand to self-fund. I mean, coming through the iBank, you have the option of holding on to that money, using us as a line of capital. And then ultimately, if that money has not been exhausted, you could go ahead and use your capital on hand to pay down your loan or pay off your loan. We have gotten feedback where it's not beneficial for towns to take out a small loan for a small project. We have the flexibility where you can combine multiple projects into one loan. You don't have to take out multiple loans for each project. Just keep in mind the parameters on timing. So if you take out a loan, you have your timing in terms of receiving your concurrence of award from DOT from the quarter that you get allocated. And you also have the timing factor kicking in for your construction. So once you commence construction, that also has to be considered for all those projects being lumped into one loan. And then lastly, time constraints. I do understand for a lot of municipalities and counties, coming through a state program, it requires a lot of hurdles that you have to climb over pretty much. And there's a lot of requirements that have to be met, a lot of factors that play a role. And sometimes towns have come up and said, look, I'm starting my project. This is kicking off in 1 month or 2 months. Well, realistically, I'm not gonna lie to you, we can't have everything said and done in 2 months. Squeezing it would be probably anywhere around 4 months. And that's really squeezing it. But keep in mind, if you do have time, your savings may be beneficial going through that time and coming through us. And also consider the fact that we will be in contact with DOT on your behalf. We will be in contact with DOT environmental, local aid. We will also be in contact with your engineers, our bond counsel. So we're handling all that for you. Yes, we will be reaching out to you for a lot of requirements. However, we're acting on your behalf. The faster your project application and project move, the better it is for both sides. So just keep in mind, there are constraints, yes, but we have overcome them. And we have currently 24 projects allocated in our system for 100.2 million. Of those 24 projects, the vast majority of those projects are from repeat borrowers. We have counties that have come through our program on multiple projects, and there's a reason, there's something to be said about that. We also have municipalities that have come through. But as mentioned, there's a reason for that. It's because our program works. And those folks haven't had issues with our program, and they know that we're diligent in getting the requirements met. This is just a screenshot of our NJ-Moves portal application. That's what the login page would look like. I can tell you folks that coming through our program, the only obligation, your obligation begins when you close on your short-term loan. So a couple things to consider. You can have an NJ Moves account, costs you nothing, takes about 5 minutes to set it up, and we can help you with that. And that number on the screen is a number to our assistant project manager, Melinda Roslin. She's very diligent, very committed. She works really hard on your behalf to get things moving. She's the one that can set up your account. It will be a simple phone call, takes 5 minutes to set up your account. You have your account, it's there. Any point in the year you want to submit a project for review and then for an application meeting, go ahead and log in anytime and do it. When you receive allocation, there's no obligation there either. If you don't meet the timeline for concurrence of award, or you decide that, look, right now some things happen, it's not in our budget, we can't do this, no problem. We would just deallocate. You do lose 5 points. However, you remain on the project priority list. And we follow up with you on a quarterly basis to check and confirm, hey, is this project still on? Did you still want to move forward with this, or you just want to keep it on the project priority list? So we're very flexible, folks. You can simply call us, email us. We'll be happy to answer any of your questions. So with that said, any questions you have, we're going to open the floor at the end of George's presentation. The water bank financing program is now coming up, and I'll pass that over to George.
All right. So everyone, as Rob mentioned, I am George Rolon. I am the project manager here at the iBank. I'm going to talk to you about the water bank financing opportunities, and a lot of this is going to have to do with the bipartisan infrastructure law and all of the principal forgiveness and new funding opportunities that we have in terms of our rates. Just before I get into that, I just want to say that on the transportation side, I know a lot of you are familiar with the water bank, and that is a federal program. But the transportation bank program is actually a state-run program. So a lot of the entanglements and the requirements on the water bank aren't present on the transportation side. So if you've got any qualms about coming in through our transportation program, just know that it is a lot simpler of a program. The requirements are less burdensome, and the turnaround time for that program is a lot faster, with both the review time as well as the requisition processing. So with that, I'll get into the water bank. And really, I'm going to breeze through some of these since Rob touched upon a lot of the aspects of our program. In terms of financing, the programs are very similar. The main difference being on the transportation side, we allocate 2 projects, whereas on the water side, it's really a rolling basis, as well as a ranking issue on the drinking water side. So Similar to the Transportation Bank, as most of you know, the Water Bank is a partnership between the NJDEP and the iBank to provide low-cost financing for projects that improve water quality or protect public health. Our first loans were issued in 1987, and to date, we have issued 8.11 billion long-term loans, and we have currently 1.3 billion in outstanding short-term loans that are in the program. A rough estimate of the amount of savings that we've issued to New Jersey, it's approximately 3 billion in interest savings as well as principal forgiveness savings. And really that number is a little bit low because that actually assumes that everyone who has borrowed through our program has a AAA rating. The moment you deviate from that AAA rating, your savings are actually greater. So really, we probably saved New Jersey closer to 4 billion. But again, some history. In terms of clean water, as most of you know, there are two programs that come through the water bank. There's the clean water program as well as the drinking water program. On the clean water side, these are the types of eligible projects, water infrastructure, stormwater management, flood resiliency, site remediation. We do equipment purchases as well as green infrastructure. And then on the drinking water side, anything to protect public health. So lead service line replacements, treatment facilities, storage facilities, water mains, the whole gamut. And then the new kid on the block, PFAS and emerging contaminants is also a big ticket item for the drinking water side, which I will talk about a little bit later. Application overview, again, rolling application submission process. On the clean water side, you're awarded based purely on readiness. So you have to submit to the program, and once your project is ready, you're queued up for financing. And our dollars are actually not committed until you close on that short-term loan versus the transportation side where you're actually committed the dollars before you even close. And you've got a year to get into construction on the transportation side. That's not the case on the water side. So again, based on readiness, and then funds are committed upon short-term loan closing. On the drinking water side, it's priority ranking and readiness. Mostly that's a carryover from previous years where we had limited drinking water funding. I don't anticipate that we're going to have as limited of a funding this year. However, there will be limited principal forgiveness, which is essentially our version of a grant. So there will be limited principal forgiveness on the drinking water side as well as the clean water. With that, your project, just like on the transportation side, has to be on our project priority list, which is also updated quarterly. And our multi-step application process is located on h2loans.com. This is just a quick screenshot of H2 Loans. It's basically a project dashboard and an upload portal where you can submit all your project documents, and then you could see where each review lies. So on the right-hand side, you could see the 5 main reviews of that program. And where particularly this project had 100% completion on all those reviews. But again, this is just an overview of what our application process looks like. Similar to the transportation bank, our short-term interest is 0.362% on the water, significantly lower than transportation. However, there's a couple of factors that fall into that. So again, if you're coming in for a water bank program, your short-term interest on cost incurred and submitted to the program is going to be 0.362%. That changes monthly. So this is the updated percentage for this month. We actually just set that this morning. Similar to transportation bank, cost incurred, average disbursement within 2 weeks. So there's limited out-of-pocket costs. As Rob mentioned, more efficient than MENS, and we have the same SAIL short-term disaster program that is on the transportation side. It's essentially bridge loans for any projects that are FEMA eligible during a declared emergency. Very successful program. I think we've probably financed almost $1 billion worth in project costs through that program to date. We work in conjunction with NJOEM on that program. So again, if God forbid, knock on wood, next disaster, you ever have any bridge financing needs, by all means, please consider the program. Again, any project that comes through that program basically will be charged the same short-term interest rate that's up on the screen right now. The main difference is upon long-term takeout, you'll only be long-term financing the cost that FEMA hasn't covered. So let's take the Sandy disaster as an example. We financed 100% of most of the projects that came through the program. However, they then received 90% grant from FEMA. They ultimately ended up long-term financing just the 10% remainder at the end of the day, but they financed all of the costs through the short-term program through us. And then we have some projects that had improvement type projects. So they actually financed a little more than 10% through the program. So maybe it came out to like a 75-25 split, where they received 75% grant from FEMA and 25% we long-term financed at our long-term rate. Our long-term terms, we can offer loans for the lesser of the useful life of the project, or 30 years. It's 45 years in the case of CSO projects. Similar to the Trans Bank, we have a waiver of the 5% down payment, must be investment grade rating. And your long-term loan is also converted upon construction completion. So we like to see all of our projects go into our short-term program, proceed to construction completion, and then we long-term fund you at the pure cost of the project. One key component of our program is our intended use plans, and this is really what outlines all of the program terms for that year. Typically, that's proposed in fall. However, because of the bipartisan infrastructure law recently, we had to prolong our distribution of the IUP until we can get all the terms straight for that. So that was actually published May of this year. The link is attached there, and we're going to make this presentation available to you. So all the links within the presentation, you'll be able to click on. But if you want to see the full IUP, that's where you can find it, and that'll have all the terms, all the principal forgiveness, and all the project types that we finance. I'm going to go through that in the next couple of slides, though. So here, kind of a cheat sheet of what we're offering on the clean water side. There's going to be a total of 117 million in anticipated principal forgiveness loans, and that's the breakdown of what we're offering. I'm going to go through each individual type in the next couple of slides, but this is the clean water. So again, clean water for 2023, we're going to have approximately 117 million in principal forgiveness loans. On the drinking water side for 2023, we're going to have approximately 64 million in anticipated principal forgiveness loans, and that's broken down by the categories listed there. So the first thing I want to talk about is the affordability criteria. This was formerly disadvantaged communities. So what we've done is we've merged the criteria for both the clean water and the drinking water side. So basically you meet the affordability criteria if you have an affordability score of 80 or less. The equation to determine that score is up on the screen right now. And again, this will be provided to you, so you'll have this. Or if you are eligible to receive 80 environmental justice, economic overburden criteria ranking points, then you also qualify for the affordability criteria. Again, more detail can be found in our IUP, and I'll get into what that means for you in terms of your projects when we get into the actual project type slides. This is just how you would determine if you have multiple communities within your service area. You basically take a weighted average of what the income is, and that'll help determine whether you meet that affordability criteria or not. So this is just an example of how we would do that based upon 3 towns, population served, and then what that weighted average will come out to be. So what does that mean? First off, if you meet the affordability criteria, on the clean water side, we have 36 million dedicated in principal forgiveness loans. There is a $2 million PF cap per applicant. And the way that's broken down, and you're going to see this on every slide that I show, it's got the breakdown of what that principal forgiveness is and how we break it down by cost category. So if you meet the affordability criteria and you're a clean water project, the first 2 million in your project costs will be 100% principally forgiven. Then the next 2 million is going to be at what we call our base rate, which is going to be 50% zero interest loan and a 50% AAA market rate loan. It's going to be essentially a blended interest rate of 50% of the market rate. And then anything after that, from 4 to 10 million, you get the affordability rate, which is a blended rate of 25% of the market rate. So a slightly better deal. 75% of the fund is going to be at 0%. The remaining 25 will be at our AAA rate. And then anything over 10 million in project costs will be at a 50-50 split again. So you're essentially go back to that base rate once you get past the 10 million threshold. On the drinking water side, similar but slightly different. There's only 5 million available for affordability criteria with a $1 million cap. So the first $1 million is PF eligible, and we'll get 100% principally forgiven loan. Then when it deviates is the next 1 to 11 million is going to get that 25% blended rate. So a slightly better deal on there. And then we get back to our 50% blended rate at anything over $11 million. One key difference between the clean water and the drinking water is that the drinking water program has a $25 million applicant cap. So anything above 25 million in project costs. So if you've got 10 projects and it totals 26 million, you only qualify up to 25 million in the drinking water program. And then anything over that 25 million is strictly at the iBank's AAA market rate. So just keep that in mind if you have multiple projects. This is a per applicant stipulation. So once you pass that 25 million threshold, again, any costs will be at our 100% AAA rate as we have funds. So there may be a limitation on that. Right now, I don't foresee that, but there's a little caveat that as the iBank has capacity, we will finance costs over 25 million at AAA rate. The next set aside is the CSO green. Oops. I know that the headings might be cut off a little bit here. Set aside is for CSO abatement green gray. Really, this is for CSO abatement projects that utilize green and gray infrastructure. So we're talking about green roofs, rain gardens, porous pavement, things like that. This is only on the clean water side, obviously. So $30 million is dedicated with a $5 million PF cap. For this project, for this program, the first 10 million in project costs, half of that is at 50% principal forgiveness. So unlike the affordability criteria where with 100% for the first million is guaranteed, this is 50%. So whatever your project is, cut it in half. That half is going to be principally forgiven at 50%, and then the remainder is going to be at that 50-50 split of iBank costs. So total in all, it'll be 50% principally forgiven, 25% at 0%, 25% at AAA market rate for the first 10 million. And then anything over 10 million is going to go back to the base rate of 50-50. Now, there's also a CSO abatement and affordability grouping. So this is if you meet the affordability criteria and you're a CSO project, there's 30 million available, and you're actually able to combine the two. So you can get 5 million. There's a 5 million cap for the CSO and a 2 million cap for the affordability. And the way that works out is it's a little bit complicated, but again, we're going to have these slides made available to you. I did not make up the rules. I'm just adhering to them, but it's 100% PF for the first 5 million. Then you go back to the base rate for the next 5. And then once you pass the 10 million threshold, that's when that extra 2 million in principal forgiveness kicks in. So then your next 2 million will be 100% principally forgiven. Then it goes back to the base rate again, 50-50, and then 14 to 20 million will be at the affordability rate. Anything over 20 million will be back to the 50-50 base rate. So again, there's significant savings if you've got a CSO abatement project that also has affordability. There's also going to be a set aside for energy and water efficiency projects. And basically this meets the goal and requirements of the energy efficiency as defined by the US EPA's Green Project Reserve Guidance. And there's a link to that guidance right there. $10 million dedicated, 2 million per applicant cap. Again, first 4 million is going to be at 50% PF. The rest is going to be at the blended rate. 4 to 10 million is going to be at the 75-25% rate. And then anything over 10 million is going to be at 50-50. Next, we have lead service line. Similar to previous years, lead service line program, we're going to have 25 million dedicated. There's going to be a 5 million PF cap. Now you can both qualify for both affordability and not affordability. So you don't have to be in meet the affordability criteria to qualify for these funds. If you don't meet the affordability criteria, the first 10 million in project cost is going to be 50% PF, 25-25. 10 to 25 million is going to be at a blended rate, the base blended rate, and then anything over 25 million is going to be AAA market rate. If you do meet the affordability, the biggest difference is you get that affordability rate of 75% 25 for your cost from 10 to 20 million. All right, so the main difference between the two is that one has the affordability rate of 75-25 and one does not. So a slightly better deal if you meet the affordability criteria. And then, as I said, the new kid on the block, emerging contaminants, which includes PFAS. So on the CW side, there's 4 million dedicated. On the drinking water side, there's 13 million dedicated. 2 million cap on the CW, and a 1 million cap on the drinking water side. I believe there are some talks of moving some of this money from the CW over to the drinking water side. There'll be more information on that. There's also discretionary funds set aside. And I forgot what the total amount was, but I think it's somewhere in the realm of 10 to 15 million. That's also going to be added to either emerging contaminants or the lead program. So even though this says 13 million, I expect that to be slightly higher when it's all said and done, because we do have some discretionary fund that we're going to go to either lead or PFAS, depending on the demand at the time of this project priority list. There's also a water quality restoration set aside, 6 million dedicated, and 2.5 million cap. And this is really for improvement and equipment purchases that help eliminate, prevent, or reduce documented occurrences of shellfish bed downgrades, beach closings, and advisories due to HABs, harmful algae blooms. There's also a stormwater reuse grant. There's not much available for this. I think there's essentially 4 grants available at $1 million a piece. And you're essentially going to get an 80% grant on this. It's an 80% actual grant and then a 20% principal forgiveness loan. So essentially it's $1 million grant for stormwater reuse projects. Again, there's not much available. I believe there's in total 4 million. So essentially this will go to 4 projects. So it's any projects that are intended to address infrastructure needs for combined sewer overflows or stormwater management. And DEP will be the determining factor on which projects kind of fall into this category. And then we have the NANO program, which I know a lot of you are familiar with. It's for small drinking water systems that serve 10,000 or fewer residents, 8 million capped, 500,000 per applicant, so not as much PF. And really you're looking at the first $1 million will get that 500,000 PF, the other 500,000 will be at the base rate financing. And then you've got 1 to 25 million. If you're publicly owned, it's a 50-50 split. If you're privately owned, it's actually a 25-75 split. So there's more interest bearing on privately owned entities than there are on the publicly owned entities. And then again, anything over 100 is going to be at the AAA market rate. For affordability, it's essentially the same thing, except you now have that affordability rate, and affordability is only for publicly owned systems. And then we've got very small water systems. So this is just like Nano. This used to be called Nano Light. I think they changed the name to just very small water systems. And it's basically for any drinking water system that serves 1,000 or fewer residents. There's approximately 3 to 5 million dedicated. It all depends on how much we spent in the last fiscal year, which just ended. So we started off with 3, and there may be another 2 million coming in from last year. So with that, that's going to be 100% PF grant, principal forgiveness loan for the first 7,500 in project costs, 750,000 in project costs, and then we go into the 50-50, 25-75, depending on if you're publicly or privately owned. And again, I know it's a lot of info, it's a lot of numbers, but we will make this available to you so that you have it. And then also, please feel free to check the IUP, because the IUP will actually go into a little more detail than I have of kind of the stipulations and the requirements of each type of project. But again, that link is in the slideshow as well. And then this is just our WISE calculator. It's located on wise.h2loans.com. And what this will do is you can go in and put your anticipated project costs, and it'll then spit out for you your debt service, as well as a comparison between private financing and our financing. So for example, this was a $10 million project. They just put it in at the base rate, and there's estimated savings of approximately 1.6 million coming through our program on a $10 million project over, I believe it was 30 years this was put in for. So over the course of 30 years, this project saved $1.6 million in financing. And this is not taking into consideration any principal forgiveness loans, any affordability rate. This is just purely if you came in on the base rate. So if your project qualifies for any of those PF opportunities or affordability rate opportunities, then your savings will actually be greater than this. We're actually working on instituting a new calculator that's going to take into consideration the project type. That's probably a ways away before we get that up and running. But eventually, hopefully by next fiscal year, we'll have that. So you can actually be able to put in your project type and see what principal forgiveness opportunities are available to you. Currently, that is not a feature that is available, but we hope to have that up and running at some point in the near future. And then with that, that's our contact info. I'll turn back over to Rob and we will answer any questions.
Thank you, George. At this point, we'll open the floor, or John, if you had anything.
Yeah, no, thank you, gentlemen. I appreciate it. This was very helpful. I know that we have the PowerPoint presentation that we're going to make available on our website. Please, everyone, make notice, and we'll include this, or this is included in the PowerPoint as well, the PowerPoint presentation. But we do have one question before I turn it back over to President O'Connor to thank you again and to close out the session. This question is, can you expand on what types of site remediation is covered by the water bank? What other contaminants besides PFAS?
Yeah, sure. So in terms of site remediation, the big key component of that is there must be a water quality benefit, right? So whatever kind of remediation you're doing must provide some kind of water quality benefit, whether it be maintaining the infrastructure or protecting the infrastructure, or if there's some issue with leakage into the soil that goes into the groundwater table. So as long as we can make a nexus to a water quality benefit, it is an eligible project. Again, we can work with you to kind of work through what your project details are and see, you know, how we can kind of spin it or discuss it for it to be an actual water quality benefit. In terms of emerging contaminants, it's basically substances and microorganisms, including anything that's manufactured or naturally occurring, materials that are known or anticipated in the environment that may pose a risk to human health, aquatic life, or the environment. All right, so there are a couple of different types that you can pull into that. But really, if you take a look at our IP, it'll kind of go into more detail. But there's a couple of different items. There's PFAS containing materials. There's aqueous film forming foam. There's anything related to pharmaceuticals, pesticides. So again, if you want to go into more detail, we can take a look at the IUP, or an even better scenario, if you have a project in mind, by all means, go into either of the systems, H2 loans on the water side, just submit a quick project description. And then there will be a button for you to actually request a project meeting. And what that'll do is it'll actually get representatives from both the DEP and the iBank on the line. And we can go in more detail of kind of what we think their project looks like. And if we think it'll qualify for certain things, that's actually the best avenue to go through in terms of, you know, finding out what qualifies and what projects will be eligible for that PF.
Great, thank you. We have one more question, and then we'll have time for one more if anyone has any, but then we'll wrap it up. So this question is, how can we determine which communities are eligible under the Federal Rural Program Initiative?
Perfect. So actually, if you go to our website, and let me know if you can still see the screen, because I'm actually going to head over there right now.
Yeah, well, we can see the contact information.
Okay, let me.
So and your website's on the bottom. Yep.
I'm going to do a new share real quick. Okay, so here we go. So actually, you should be able to see our website right there. So this is the actual Transportation Bank website. And if you go on the sidebar here, there's actually a Rural Project Initiative tab. And if you click right there, this is actually a map of New Jersey. Basically, any project that is within the white, not the purple, qualifies for Rural Project Initiative. But if you scroll down, you can actually pick out a county map, and you can actually go into your county and see a full-blown map that highlights, and it's loading up right now, but it'll highlight exactly what communities qualify. So essentially on this map, anything in the white, if your project resides within that area, will qualify for the Rural Project Initiative. So again, all of the counties are listed there, so you can easily just go in, take a look and see if you fall within that project realm. Okay.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you, gentlemen. I don't see any other questions. If you do have any questions, I know these gentlemen are very responsive. They'll get back to you right away. Their email addresses are up there. If you miss it by some reason, just email us and we'll make sure to reach out to either Dave, the executive director, Rob, or George or Melinda as well. So, Madam President, you can close us out. And again, just want to thank you, gentlemen, for being here today. I appreciate it a great deal.
All right, John, thank you so much. We actually here have a question, if you don't mind. I figured at the end if I was going to let everybody else go, but since we have a couple of minutes, if that's okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Would a landfill expansion project fit under the clean water program?
Well, landfill expansion is a tough one.
Can't hear him.
Yeah, landfill expansion is a tough one, actually. We'd have to really sit down with the engineers at DEP to see what the full scope is going to be. I know there are a number of issues that they run into when it comes to landfills. Nothing is off the table, but absolutely, if you want to discuss in more detail, we can get the proper folks on the line to discuss that.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. All right, so I want to thank everyone for being here. I want to thank our presenters. You did a great job, and for making time to share this valuable information with us. John, I think you'll share the PowerPoint. If anybody has any questions, you can certainly reach out to the great NJAC staff and we'll get them to the appropriate person to get information back to you. Wish everybody a happy summer, be safe, and we will see you all soon. Thanks, John.